porn. I'm just going to go back to the highest vibration on my vibrator because that helps me to just like get to the goal, get to the orgasm. I am half Samoan, half Swiss, like half brown, half white, and that's always been a really like massive inner conflict inside of me. Sex fades with age, and I've just seen that to be such a fallacy, such an illusion. Really is not the case. My older couples clients are having the best sex of their lives. Perhaps people see me as being like over-identified with my sexuality, or like, you know, my entire life is about sexuality. And prevent STIs, like don't get pregnant, all of the stuff that naturally makes us contract around sex. We are immensely afraid of talking about pleasure as adults. And to like, you know, I really carried into this knowing that I was never going to return into corporate. I was like, I can't go back. And then I was like, well, if this doesn't work out, what do I do? Like, I just I feel like the first time I kind of decided what I wanted to do was when I decided I wanted to be an accountant. Alongside that, I also wanted to be a politician until I started pole dancing, and then I realized that any dreams I had of being a politician would probably not come into fruition. But you know, all of these things were very much like what was my guiding star through that was just what would impress my parents. If I'm being honest, I remember thinking like my dad would be proud of me if I was an accountant, or yeah. Also, my parents are a huge reason for what I do today. I'd say that their relationship, their like pained marriage, where I had to be like a young mum to my mum really young and had to mediate for them often, is one of the reasons that I had so much fear around attaching to other people, coming into relationships of my own. I was terrified of being married, of being like a mum who I perceived to be like so trapped. Like you know, you're a mum, you have kids, you get trapped in this marriage, is the way that I had experienced my mum's life. And I was like, I don't want that for myself. How can I do all that I can to have healthier relationships? So what sparked me to go into pole dancing is I was out in the clubs, like out just partying in town with a bunch of girlfriends when I was 19. And there was no one else in the club, and so the dancers let me have a shot on the pole, and I was just jamming with them. And one of them said to me, you should do pole dancing, it'd be really good. And I was like, what's pole dancing? Is that even a thing? And at this time I was an incredibly like I was very reserved. The idea of doing pole dancing, especially when it had that level of taboo at that time, was a really like huge thing. It was something I knew my boyfriend at the time would really disapprove of and have judgment around. It was something I knew my family would be like shocked about. And yeah, I still remember making the call to the studio from my car and feeling it as one of the most intimidating yet powerful acts of liberation. And yeah, really the reason I came to it is because I just really was so afraid of my own body. I was so afraid of my sexuality. I was so afraid of taking up space. I was super afraid of being seen. Like the idea of being on stage was for me. And yeah, the reason I stayed and made such a thing of it was because it just continued to offer me so much healing. The pole dancing industry has such like a powerful sisterhood, and of course it's not just women that are in that space. But seeing women come together around this common will to free their bodies, free their sensual self-expression, was just magical.
Like with the people that you work now, like what kind of maybe themes come to your work in terms of people? Where do they come forth to you with?
Yeah. Man, it's such a broad spectrum of things. It's something I love about my job. And actually what's interesting is consistently people come into my practice and a month in they'll say to me, Michelle, never in my life would I have thought that we would be inquiring into the things that we're inquiring into as part of my journey of sexual liberation. I thought that we would be learning some practical tips, or I had to change like the way I was doing sex or self-pleasuring, and yes, that can sometimes be a part of it, but because our experience of sexuality is so holistic, you know, and is tied into so many different pieces, it's, yeah, so often I'm not actually talking about sex on my sessions, the vast majority of the time. And so, you know, people will come to me with blocks to orgasm. Perhaps they've never had an orgasm, perhaps they want to try different types of orgasm and want to have that as part of their experience. People will come with feeling like their past relationship or current relationship to porn has really inhibited their ability to be in their body and connect with a partner in the present moment. People come with sexual trauma and feeling like their body is so tight and numb, or even like pelvic pain has resulted from that, or they have pelvic pain that's resulted from other things. People would come with like so many layers around their heart, and they're immensely afraid to take those down, to trust and to open. I do a lot of attachment work. I work with couples who are just unsure how to communicate. They have a really unsafe container for communication, an unsafe container for authentic sexual exploration. Sometimes people even come to me like on the very brink of breakup. I've worked with couples who are just about to start the separation process, and then they've said, well, let's just give this a shot. And so, yeah, like it comes from like people really struggling, feeling like some heavy blocks are in the way, to people that are feeling like they're not in a place of survival, they're in a place of like being at baseline, and they really just want to, yeah, they have curiosity, they want to step more fully into their desires, their power.
And I questioned, and I kind of wondered, you know, with your work, or with that self-expression and with that liberation, I feel like a lot of the times, definitely I did, and a lot of people probably as well, like feel like it's maybe like a luxury, or not that important, or like, you know, what's the point of this whole sexual liberation? Like, oh, it's just like such a small part of yourself, almost like self-indulgent maybe. And I know for myself that wasn't true, because I started doing the work and I was like, wow, this is so healing, and all these things up and down. But I kind of wonder like what your perspective on that is.
My sexuality and the way I perceive sexuality is that it's such an important and integral part of us, and it's not all of us. So, you know, when I think of the way people might perceive me sometimes, perhaps people see me as being like over-identified with my sexuality, or like, you know, my entire life is about sexuality, and that's just not my truth. That's an important part of my wholeness. It's something that I value so much. It's something that enriches every single aspect of my being, not just in terms of sex, but in terms of the way in which I relate to sexuality, pleasure, aliveness as a whole. So yeah, what I would offer people is, you know, so often people feel the call, they feel the resistance, what the invitation of connecting more deeply with your sexuality is revealing to you is that there's something up for your healing, something up for your integration, or you to step into. And I just invite people to use that as a compass, to go towards that, even if it's as an experiment, and see what you might find. What I see with all of my clients is that something miraculous happens when you find what your sexuality authentically really looks like and feels like to you. And so I think it's really important to like recognize, yeah, not everyone has the privilege of doing this, and many of us do. And so how do we want to choose to relate to that? And how can we, you know, do the work as part of collective liberation, as part of raising the vibe together? How can we show up to, you know, shift the experience of those more marginalized than us, and do it from pleasure and do it from ease?
Yeah, what would you say, like, what would you be maybe main themes that you think are missing, or that you would want to bring from your work to younger generation?
Yeah, so I think something that I really want to see is more of a balance between like what comes across as so fear-based, like based in fear, like prevent STIs, like don't get pregnant, all of the stuff that naturally makes us contract around sex and really feeds into that sex is dirty, sex is dangerous kind of narrative. And I don't think there's not value to that education, obviously, it's just not balanced. And so, where are young people also getting messages around how sex is pleasurable, sex is generative? Yeah, I really feel like we need to be having that education, and I think we are immensely afraid of talking about pleasure as adults, and so there's understandably so many blocks around then having that conversation with young people. I think we fear that they're going to take that and run and lose themselves to dirty pleasure. But I also understand like why that feels like a conversation that is not without risk, and I understand why schools are really afraid of facilitating that aspect of education. And so when parents ask me, I say, well, have that conversation with your children yourself, whilst we're figuring all of this out.
Now that we know you have this beautiful programs, you have one-on-one clients, and you do this beautiful, social media wisdom, how did you start? Like, what was your journey into even, getting to from like being completely in a different area to now?
Yeah, so really it started for me with pole dancing. So one, coming into pole, it offered me so much, and then I really noticed that it wasn't really getting to the root of what I deeply wanted to change, and that was the way I was experiencing sex, that was the way I was experiencing orgasm, that was like the disassociation that was happening to my body. And I noticed how many people were coming into pole dancing looking for that same liberation and needing something deeper. And so really from there, I just started seeing like what is even out there to shift all of this. And in my curious adventures, I started to write a blog, which was called billybomb.com at the time. And it felt so edgy for me. So Billy Bomb used to be my burlesque name. Yeah. And my tagline was the sex positive showgirl was. And so I had that blog for a few years, and I would just, it was really for me at that time, just the space to practice, normalizing this for myself. At that time, I was really afraid of saying the word pussy, and there was just so much there, and I just decided to start writing about what I was researching. And through that, I was exposed to more and more of what was out there, and just randomly one day decided to just sign up for a year-long training around sexuality. And it was one of those things that really wasn't at all this mind-based process. I wasn't sitting down and thinking, how will this unfold? It was just this magnetic force towards this thing that made no sense to anyone else that I was explaining this to. And I just did it, and I just knew it was one of those other big turning points. All of this was happening alongside whilst I was doing my corporate career, and I was just giving myself permission to experiment with what I thought, I could best offer. Until this point, I'd been teaching pole dancing workshops for many, many years, and naturally I had really, before I'd even gone into any of this formally, my movement-based workshops had always been geared to authentic movement, to really dropping into your body and not just performing what sexy looks like, but dancing from what sensuality feels like. And so I started by just taking all of this deepened trauma healing, somatic experiencing based work into my movement based workshops. And then I started with pro bono clients for a long time, just practicing so much. I did hundreds and hundreds of practicums to really just like feel into this. It was a long time of just doing one-on-one sessions with just women for the first year, and then I started to study more in conscious relating, couples work, slowly expanding, and then over the years I've added group programs for couples. It was really hard for me. One, because I had to connect with like all of my self-trust, because I had very little support from the people around me in this decision. This made no sense to anyone except my partner, Chris, who has always been like my fierce cheerleader and trusts my own intuition so much in a way that's been so helpful for me to build that trust with myself. And I had never seen anyone else go on this journey before me. And to like, I really carried into this knowing that I was never going to return into corporate. I was like, I can't go back. Like, yes, it's an option, but I knew in my soul I would never be able to go back. And then I was like, well, if this doesn't work out, what do I do? Like, I just had to trust that I would figure it out.
Yeah. When you see people who do work, and I've done it a lot, when I see someone who is doing the work that I really admire, and it's all I see, I get very like, oh, man, they just have it figured out. They just know exactly what they're doing, and they're so confident and stuff. So it really helped talking to people about how they might feel sometimes, whether it's their challenges or personal, mundane, boring things that, are like maybe, I don't know, feelings that are not that exciting.
Yeah, so I feel so comfortable in sharing that I have such a human experience amidst all of this, right? I have a massive imposter syndrome that, I have changed my relationship to that part of me over the years. And I absolutely have days where I'm getting stuck in comparison on social media, when I'm feeling like I haven't grown fast enough, or I'm not doing my sexuality practice enough, or, my relationship should be here. Just all of this pressure. I think it's so important for all of us to be more and more forthcoming about that, and to break down these illusions of perfection or any one person having it all figured out. Because I think what's cool is my relationship to my sexuality has drastically changed over time. Like so much so, and it's something I'm so proud of, because the work really paid off for me, and I've seen, I've guided so many people on that journey. But what's really cool is there's nothing exceptional about me, right? Like, I think it's so cool to just like lead with that.
Do you have any like alternative universe, Michelle's? Like, what would you, if you weren't doing this work?
I think at some point, like maybe this is an alternative universe thing, but I believe, my pussy tells me that this is like, will be an evolution of my work, is I'm fascinated with childbirth, even though I, at this point, don't feel called to actually have children myself. And I really want to become a doula at some stage. I think, my older self will move into that space. I think birth is fascinating and quite otherworldly in so many ways. And so there's that. I also really want to be a writer, so that's a really big goal of mine, is to have written many books over the course of my life. And I really want to begin on that journey by writing my first book this year. That will just be, for practice. I'll probably just give it to everyone for free, in my subscription list or something like that.
Like one or two, I don't know, like a suggestion for people to inquire maybe within themselves, who are feeling kind of called to this work, but maybe not very much, just dipping their toes and scared for now.
Small steps that people can take. So I think a really accessible one that I love to share as often as I can is really starting with your relationship to pleasure in your day-to-day. And so a question that I personally ask myself as often as I can is, how can I make this 5% more pleasurable? How can I bring yeah, a little more ease, a little more yumminess into my body whilst I am writing an email? How can I go and massage my hands before I go onto a client session? And so I think when we change our relationship to pleasure holistically, that can be a really nice dip your toes in the water access point for people that absolutely informs our experience of pleasure in the realm of sexuality as well. I'm really obsessed with slow down in relationship to sex and pleasure. And I think this is one of the biggest blocks that we come up against is it's a lot harder, if not impossible, to experience pleasure when we are in this like fast state, this stressed state, which, because of the world in which we live in, the vast majority of us are experiencing as a baseline. And then we ask ourselves, well, why is it hard for me to drop into my body during sex? Like, why can't I let go? And it's because the body is in this long-held state of survival mode. And so I think a beautiful inquiry is, well, what's your relationship to slow down? What might it look like to slow down the way that you masturbate? What might it look like to slow down your breath and your physical touch, to not just bust one out in 5 minutes, but to say, how can I take 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever that expansion looks like for you? Like, does that change the way I experience my body? And often what people feel in that process is, okay, well, when I slow down, it forces me to acknowledge how much stress and anxiety I'm feeling in my body, which is why often we then switch to, well, I'm just going to go back to porn, or I'm just going to go back to the highest vibration on my vibrator, because that helps me to just like get to the goal, get to the orgasm, and then I feel like relieved and all is well. I've like ticked that off the box, I ticked that box or whatever. And so, you know, as I name all of those pieces, I'm reminded of how complex it is to actually slow down, how it's a muscle that we build. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Michelle. It was such a wonderful time. I'm just like
Fucking time, took so many notes.